Growing up, I remember my family having a statement that they would always say that I absolutely hated. And that statement was that we are poor people. It's not what we do. When somebody would ask them to go beyond their comfort zone, the statement that they would make was, we are poor people. It's not what we do. When somebody asked them to do something that was uncomfortable, we are poor people. It's not what we do. And I don't blame them because somewhere along the line in their reality and in their family, someone adopted this belief that we are poor people. It's not what we do. And then the rest of the entire family just carried that forward. And as a child of immigrants, as being an immigrant myself, I understand that because coming to another country, coming to the US, and having to work your tail end off, having to save every penny to be able to feel some sort of security, it makes you feel poor. It makes you want to reassess your priorities. It makes you prioritize hoarding cash away, even though you may never need to use it. And even though you don't know how to use it to improve your life, you still do that to make sure that you can have a quote unquote better life. And that statement is something that I absolutely hated growing up. I just questioned that statement, which is just because we're poor does not it doesn't equate to the things that we are doing, because if we don't do those things, we're never going to grow. We're never going to be able to get out of our comfort zone. If we don't take the risks that we need to take in life, we are always going to stay poor. And personally, for me, it's funny because a friend of mine asked me the other day, what did you want to be when you grow up? And it was a funny question because I had to think about it for a second. And I felt embarrassed answering because it is quite embarrassing. But to be honest, it's been a very incredible driving factor inside of my life. So the answer that I gave her was, I wanted to be Bruce Wayne. I wanted to be Batman. He had a undeniable conviction to what he was doing, and he had a lot of money. And at that point in my life, I knew I was 8 years old. We lived in a one-bedroom apartment, and I knew that I did not want to be poor. And I will do whatever it takes to win financially and physically, because I wanted to be the antithesis of what my family environment, because I knew there was more opportunities out there. I just had to be courageous enough to be able to pursue those opportunities. I share that with you because I've come to realize is that an event or something will happen inside of your life and it will shape the way that you become. Either you can become a victim or you can become a victor. And what happens in the case of my family is that an event happened inside of their life. They either lost everything or they just did not have money to begin with. And they became a victim of their circumstances. And because they became a victim of their circumstances, that became their reality. And because that became their reality, it became the reality of everyone moving forward. Everyone, generation to generation. And this is how, as people talk about generational trauma, it's how it's carried, because one person experienced something and they just passed it on to everybody else. And so what ends up happening is that because of that, and when people like myself or you are experiencing something like this, we are letting other people dictate our reality, right? Especially at the beginning, we're looking up to our parents for sustenance, for survival, for teaching us how to navigate the world. But the challenge is a lot of our parents are going through their own internal struggles, and they don't know how to formulate or have the personal development skills to be able to process their emotions, to be able to put themselves in a situation where they can show up for us as the best version of ourselves. And the best part is, for those of us that are growth oriented, that want to be the best version of ourselves, we can show up and rewrite the generational trauma that our parents have passed down over to us. Now, it's not their fault because they're just doing what they have experienced, right? And some of them have changed and some of them are improving. But the reality is, until you're a certain age, right, they are dictating your reality. Like my father dictated my reality by telling me I'm not good enough. And that became a formulation of my reality. Now, there's two factors that could happen. You either get extremely motivated in a toxic way that you're going to figure out ways to prove that you are good enough, or that reality makes you shut down and it doesn't make you even progress, right? Luckily, I use that as fuel to be able to get ahead in life, but it's always forced me to be burned out and be in this toxic state of constant improvement, right? Where sometimes it's this analogy of blissful dissatisfaction where I'm grateful for what I have and it's a skill set that I've had to learn, but there's also this side where it's never enough and I'm going to do whatever it takes to win. I share that with you because what ends up happening is that once you keep telling yourself this narrative, my family told themselves that it's their narrative that we are poor people. And once that becomes your reality, then after years of suffering, what ends up happening is that instead of blaming yourself, you start pointing the finger at everybody else. A circumstance happened, whatever that circumstance was, and then you point the finger that circumstance is the reason where you are today. When in reality, it has nothing to do with the circumstance. It has everything to do with the actions that you took after the circumstance. Because there are many people who have health issues, right? There's two types of people. Let's say you have some sort of health issue. One type of person just sits and sulks the entire time. The other type of person says, you know what, I'm going to make this the best last couple of years ever. And so same situation, they're just choosing their reality differently. And the big point here is when you point the finger at an external factor for where your life is at. Let's say I blame my spouse, or if I blame my family, if let's say I'm not where I'm at, and I just point the finger at them and say, hey, it's your fault that I'm not here. It's the government's fault. It's my parents' fault. It's my partner's fault. It's my business partner's fault. The reality is you're taking power away from you. You're taking ownership away from you, because when you give somebody else power, right, when you point the finger and say it's their fault, then they're the only ones that can make a change and you're not at fault. But when you reverse the finger and you say, hey, you know what? I got myself here. And there's a great analogy that I use, right? You got yourself here by taking the actions that you took. Yes, someone may have contributed a certain amount, but you were the one leading yourself forward, right? Yes, you could have been manipulated. Yes, you were in a situation. And I'm not saying that there's certain situations that people are not affected negatively by others and other people are controlling their life. But to a certain degree, we can't blame anybody else, right? Because the more we blame other people, the less freedom we have, right? The more you blame yourself or you take ownership, and it's not really blame, it's just saying, you know what? My actions got me here. I was the one that got myself here, even though somebody else had contributed, but ultimately you were the one in the driver's seat. And when you take that ownership, you give yourself 100% power. Power to actually make a change. Your choices are a reflection of your habits. Your habits are created by the actions that you take. You take an action, you do that repeatedly, that becomes a habit. Your actions are led by your beliefs, your emotions, and your thoughts. And your beliefs, your emotions, and your thoughts are a reflection of your identity. And if your identity is one of being a victim to the circumstances that you were put into, then you're always going to feel stuck and never going to be able to get ahead. But if you change your identity to being somebody, you know what? I got myself here. I was friends with that individual, or I put myself in this circumstance. Now, some of you will be like, hey, I'm in an environment where there is no growth. I understand that. But there's our own personal ability to grow. And I share that story is because I grew up in an environment where there was no growth. But because I took ownership and said, you know what, I'm going to change this. I'm going to be different. I'm going to take the actions that are in the antithesis of what I'm experiencing, because this is not the life that I want to live. This is not the life that I want to have. This is not the type of relationships that I want to have. And the only way you can make that change is by taking ownership, right? When you take ownership of your life, you give yourself power to change. And so when I was in weight loss coaching and health coaching, a lot of people would come in and I would ask them, hey, what do you feel is the biggest contributor to your weight gain? What caused you to be unhealthy? And people would blame their kids. They would blame their spouse. They would blame their lack of time. And what ends up happening in this cycle of blame is that you keep giving everything else power. So what ends up happening is that when your spouse wants you to be healthy, you will be healthy, right? When your kids want you to be healthy, you will be healthy. When your job wants you to be healthy or having the time to be healthy, you will be healthy. That's incorrect because they don't dictate how you live your life. You dictate how you live your life, right? I dictate how I live my life. But if I keep blaming my spouse for my lack of motivation or my lack of discipline or my lack of habits, then guess what? I'm just going to be waiting on my spouse forever to force them to make me healthy when they can't do that. It's not their responsibility. It's ours. And so what I'm trying to say is that when you say, you know what? I'm the one that's not taking action. It has nothing to do with my spouse. It has nothing to do with my kids. I just don't know how to prioritize myself. I want to quit this job and I want to start a business, but you know what? I don't know what the first step to take is. My job's not stopping me. I am. And when you do that, it just gives you a different perspective to be able to have empowerment to take the first step. That's really all it comes down to, is when you take ownership, you give yourself freedom. And when you have freedom, then the world opens up to you to take that first step. But if you play victim, you're going to stay in this crevice, in this hole, in this well that you have created for yourself that you can never get out of because you're the one that shut the top off. But when you take ownership, you're like, hey, you know what? I did this to myself. Now let me find an alternative option. The biggest thing that we can do to get out of this lack of ownership or victim mindset that has worked really well for me, and I got this from the 4 agreements, and this has really stuck with me, it's doing your best every single day, right? In all areas of your life, whether it's health, whether it's wealth, whether it's relationships, whether it's your connection to faith or something higher than yourself, whatever it may be. The litmus test for you should be, did I do my best every single day? And if you're not doing your best every single day, then you're not living up to your true potential, because your best every single day is going to change depending on where you're at, where your circumstances are, and what you need to focus on. And regardless of your circumstances, did you do your best every single day to progress your life forward? Did you take, because it's all inputs and outputs. If I focus on the right inputs, I'm going to get the right outputs, right? That's all it is. It's a math equation. It's just inputs equals outputs. Now, in the middle, there's emotions that muddy up all the water, but in reality, it's just inputs equals output. Did I do my best every single day to get those inputs done? If that's not the case, that's the first area to start. Did I show up as the best version of myself to do the best every single day? If that's not the case, that's a great litmus test for you to say, hey, you know what? I'm not reaching my full potential. And as Maslow in his theory says, 98% of people will never reach their true potential. There's only 2%. That's why I'm building the 2% club, right? Because there's 2% of people, the 2% of high performers, people who are willing to push the boundaries regardless of their environment, regardless of their circumstances, regardless of their family tree or their family lineage. You are willing to do the work to pull yourself from whatever crevice that you are in right now that life has put you in, and you are willing to take ownership to get yourself out. That is why I'm creating the 2%, because I am that individual. I had to work my tail end off to get to where I'm at, and I'm going to continue to work my tail end off till the day that I die to become the best version of myself and to have the best life, the best health, the best wealth, the best relationships that is for me. And that definition is different. You can't live based off of my standards because I'm following an inner scorecard, all right? So big point here is once you can be honest with yourself and the litmus test is, hey, did I do my best every day? The next thing is you have to come to terms that there is no one to blame except for you. If you are not making the money that you want to make, it's your fault. If you are not healthy, it's your fault. If you don't have the relationship and you're in a toxic relationship, it's your fault. Yes, you can say, hey, the other person is doing this for me, but you are the one that's choosing to stay. You are the one that's choosing to be in a job that you dislike in order to do the thing that you need to do. And yes, it provides security, but you can still dedicate an hour a day to learning the skills that you need to get to where it is that you want to go. Whether it's health, no one's stopping you from taking a 10-minute walk. No one's stopping you from drinking more water. No one's stopping you from eating more protein, right? It's simple. It isn't easy. But the way to have personal freedom is to take the ownership and say, hey, there is no one to blame except for me. It is me. It is me against myself. And what do I need to do to deflect the internal state of comfort that I have to continue pushing for progress, right? Because there's this internal mechanism of homeostasis that's going to completely pull you into comfort all the time. And you have to be consciously fighting that on a daily basis. And I'm not saying that it's bad. I'm saying that it will stop you from creating the life that you want and living the life that you want. The next thing after you have asked yourself, am I doing my best every day? Taking complete ownership and saying, hey, there's nobody else to blame. The next thing after that, it's who is it that I need to become to make the change? What's the identity that I need to create? The person who can accomplish this? What character traits do I need? What skills do I need? How do I need to show up in this world? Who do I need to be? Because it's be, do, then have. You have to become the person who can do the things to have the life that you want. And it all starts with, first, you got to take ownership. That you got yourself here and you're going to get yourself out. And the next step after that is, who do you need to become to get yourself out of there? What identity do you need to have? Our identities are fluid. We can choose to have the identity that we want, right? Somebody labeled you when you were young, and now you've carried on to that label, this ID card that somebody wrote on, when in reality, you can completely change that. You can completely transform your life by changing the identity and changing the actions that you take on a daily basis. It's not about looking at a mirror and saying affirmations or manifesting. That's great. That's all great mental masturbation. But what happens is, what's the first action that I need to take? I'll give you an example. In my previous identity, right, a couple identities ago, because I constantly do this on a regular 6-month basis, who is it that I need to become? I was emotionally reactive. I used to curse a lot. I used to show up in a very different way. I wasn't calm and collected. I wasn't grounded. I wasn't articulate with my words. I just, what I call Jackie Chan mode. I just took action, flying kicks and throwing punches, right? But in order for me to level up in my life, I had to become somebody who could be calm and collected, who can use data to regulate emotions. And I didn't just look in the mirror and say, I am this person. No, I had to figure out, what is the one action that I need to take every single day to become that person? How does that person act? How does that person feel? How does that person show up? And I took actions until that person is who I became, because action is the only answer. If you're not healthy, you got to start taking action. Well, first, you got to take ownership so you can take action. Then, if you're not in the relationship that you want, well, you got to take action. You got to have some hard conversations. You got to make sure you're on the same page, or you got to take action to find the right person for you, right? Same thing with your wealth. What skills do you need to develop to level up, whether it's in your career or whether it's in starting a business, whatever it may be? A lot of it is going to come through that action, but the only way you can take action if you stop blaming others or your circumstances or the world or the people around you or your mom or your dad, until you decide that you are the one that got yourself here and you are the one that's going to get yourself out. In the end, this is the work that is required to get the life that you want.